Right. Before we start, we're going to try and get through as much as we can because of our delayed start. But I just want to encourage you all. Now, some of you a couple of years ago met my sister, who was 13 years older than me, so she's now 79. And I better be careful, because my wife, behind my back, unbeknownst to me, has been sending her our messages, you see. And when she was over here a couple of years ago, we gave her the gospel. Sue and I gave her the gospel. And the last person in the world I ever expected to receive it, she was a person of the world, really a person of the world. And anyway, she was quite amazed at our personal testimonies. And so she went back home and you know, things sort of died down for quite a while. And all of this year, my wife has been working on her and working on her and working on her. And just a couple of few days ago, she sent my sister that song, Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross, the old Fanny Crosby hymn, which is absolutely beautiful. We're going to bring it in here very soon. It's amazing. If I have to get up here and sing it myself, it's just absolutely brilliant. But anyway, my wife has been having this conversation, and she got this from my sister this week. I love the hymn, Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross. I cannot get it out of my head. I just love it. I go round the house singing it at the top of my voice. We're in for a big low now, rain and snow, all the above, keep warm and give O'Dea a big hug and kiss from me. Cheers. It's 10 a.m, it's coffee time, and she is now a believer. She is now a believer. And I actually mentioned that at the second EMEA conference at the Perth Convention Centre, that don't ever, ever, ever give up. Seriously, don't ever give up. If we can get my sister at 79, you can get anyone at any age. All right, that's fine. Right. Things are happening around the world that are so incredible. I just picked up a few things this week about the insanity. Isaiah 5:20, you know, woe to those who call good evil and evil good, who exchange light for darkness and what's have it. And I just can't believe how bad things are getting in the real world. And Sue said to me, my wife said to me this morning, make sure you finish on a really good note. Well, we've got some rapture passages at the end, all right? And I've asked for the trumpet to be blown just as I finish. But, you know, I can't believe the blatant effrontery of the deep state and the fourth beast that I've mentioned in Daniel 7 this year. We can see it. It's amongst us and it's happening. But that particular California governor, as we all know, has ordered the California Water Board to open up all the sluice gates in the state's dams. And they are literally pumping all of the water from their reservoirs out into the Pacific Ocean. I've got the article, I can show you. And I said, why? And someone who commented on the article said, we don't have a problem with rainfall in Maryland. So he's right on the other side, the rainy part of the country. And he said, but my uncle, I think is a farmer, and the federal government is paying him 5 times his normal income for a good crop, not to plant any crop. So the farmers are being left bereft of water in California. They're paying other farmers to not grow their crops, which will it'll bring about a famine of food in the United States. And that's what they want. That's what they want. If everything else going on is not bad enough, that's just unbelievable. And, you know, we're blessed here in WA, but I have reminded you from time to time that remember the locust hordes that went through Africa, the Middle East, on towards China early last year. That devastated millions of tons of grain. And we're also in that state now where in the Midwest of America last year, they had such heavy torrential rain that the farmers at the end of last year never planted any corn or maize crops. And it's just building up and building up and building up. But do we ever hear it on Channel 2, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10? No, it's always about COVID. They've always got a banner across the screen in red, trying to scare the willies out of people. And my wife got caught flying through Melbourne on Monday, and we thought, phew, we had to, we got through there just in time. No, we got a text from our WA police to go and get tested on Thursday, and we're all clear. But they've shut that down, that whole state, 6 million people, and there are 45 active cases. Give me a break. That's going to cost the economy of Victoria $1 billion. That's more heartache for business owners. That's more devastation for people being locked down, more mental illness, more disease. You know, when we had these hospital disasters, these code yellows and that sort of thing, just a little while ago, all of the beds were filled up with people suffering from mental illness from last year. I've got nurses in here going, yeah, that's right. And it's almost impossible for a, can I say, normally unwell person to get a hospital bed because it's full of mental health patients because of the lockdowns that we've had. And it's just, if I wasn't a Christian and if I didn't have a love for God's word and love for God's people, I would shake my head and not be able to work things out. I'd be angry, I'd be sort of rebellious, I'd be all sorts of things. But it's interesting that in everything that we've been doing this year, especially when Darryl started his fill-in messages on Habakkuk, that the whole themes that has been coming through, and even in my messages, is that God is in control. Do you know what I mean? He is in control. That should not be a surprise to any of us, but he is in control. And the things that I see coming to the fore, particularly, I really hit you hard last week with the Magog War, Ezekiel 38 and 39, because if you're not looking at the Middle East, you are blind to the fact that it is on the doorstep. Israel has blown up 4 factories in Iran in the last 7 days. If you think the Iranians are going to put up with that, they aren't. And they've also now taken over Baghdad, which is probably a de facto takeover of Iraq. And that's going to be interesting because Russia and Turkey will not be pleased with that. Because if you've got Baghdad, you've got access to their oil fields to the north. And everyone wants those oil fields. So things are really, really hotting up. But we're going to go and review a couple of things. This is called The Woman That Rides the Beast. Why is it really important to finish this off? I'm starting it today and really hitting it hard next week. Why? Because apostate Christianity is everywhere in this world today. The number of times I have had people coming to me in this church as it's been growing is we've been everywhere and we can't find anyone that preaches or teaches the Bible. That's a travesty. That's an utter travesty that pastors won't pick this up and tell you what it says, because that is the only source of truth we have now left in this world. You can't believe anything that's on the media. You can't believe your politicians. You can't believe anything. And there's another thing that I found out about this week, but we'd get shut down if I said what's going to happen. But there's going to be a spectacular horrible event in the next few weeks, I believe, that will cause to bring focus and force upon believers and Christians. Believe me. And it's not going to be nice. That'll happen in America. And when it'll happen, I'll remind you that I sort of hinted, but keep your eyes on America in the next few weeks. And I want to start off here. Last week we saw the effect of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, and the biggest outcome of that was the destruction of the world power of Russia. And we're going to look at that why and how that happened. And because God is in total control, He's in control of history, He's in control of you and I, He's even in control of all of the wickedness that's happening in this world. Why? Everything's not falling apart, it's falling into place. And everything is falling into place so rapidly that it used to be an event maybe 1 year every 2 years back in the 90s where you could see it sort of creeping. Now it's every week. Sometimes it's every day. And the thing is just rushing upon us. And I would just want to pull up Ezekiel 39 verse 6 to remind you that the important consequence of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war in verse 6 is, and I will send fire, that is judgment, severe judgment, this is God speaking, this is Jesus speaking by the way, upon Magog, and those who inhabit the coastlands in safety. And that word safety is batak, which in Hebrew can mean false confidence or arrogance. And they will know that I am the Lord. So Russia will know, and the coastlands and the sea. And if you were here last week or you've seen last week's message, you'll know that I did a little thing on Hebrew parallelisms. And in Isaiah 11 and 12, it is shown in the last two lines of those verses that the coastlands of the sea equate to the four corners of the earth. So the consequences of this invasion causes God to send judgment down upon virtually every nation in this earth who has sent mercenaries to join in with those 5 nations in the invasion of Israel. And this leads to the dismantling of the east-west balance of power between the US and the European nations, and Russia as Magog and its allies, and the power of Islam as a world religion. And I'll explain, that becomes quite plain next week. Could be next year, but next year, the way I go. And the whole world will know that the God of Israel, by divine intervention, has supernaturally protected His people and His land. He constantly reiterates from chapter 36 through to the end of chapter 39 that there will be clear evidence to the Israelites, to themselves, and to the nations of the earth that Jehovah God is acting on behalf of Israel. And the most astonishing thing in Revelation 19, when we'll get to it at some stage, is that the kings of the earth and all their armies gather together to make war with the Lamb and His saints. Can you imagine anything more insane, trying to go to war with God? But seriously, that's how insane people have become these days. You know, you send your kids to school now and they're told there's 101 different genders. My daughter runs 36 medical centres, and she said to me, Dad, if a lady's coming in with ladies' problems, you're going to give them ladies' medicine. And the same thing occurs to men. Right? It's just an absolute nonsense. The medical profession cannot, in just dealing with normal malady, give you the wrong medication because it's politically correct to do so. It's just lunacy. It's lunacy, but this is what's happening to our kids. And the other thing that fascinates me, I started high school in 69, and in 74 went to university to do law and psychology. But all through my school education, we learnt history, we learnt geography, we learnt English, we learnt math, and we did a bit of science. We had what I would call a rounded education, and I just loved history. I just loved it because I would go back and I'd study ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, Greece. I discovered all of them, and I looked at all of them from through unsaved eyes, but I was really into that. And when I became a Christian and read all of the things in the Bible, I was just astounded, because the Bible is true, and what I learned in school from good teachers proved that the Bible was true. And it doesn't need to be proved, but it is. If you get good teaching and honest teaching, it all comes together, because I looked at the pagan religions of Egypt and Rome and Greece and later on into Babylon and Acadia. And it was just amazing how you can see all of these things rising to the surface again. You know, because we're going to do the woman who rides the beast in more detail next week, the thing that I'm going to push to you is that, have you seen, as a result of the Gaza conflict, these news clips of young groups of thugs walking around the city of New York beating up Jews? Well, listen, I'll tell you something. It's not too far in the future when Christians will join the Jews. Don't you ever think that we're going to miss the very start unless all of those rapture passages that I've got here at the end comes now. And so it's in control. God's in control. And when I see evil rising up, that's when I know that God is bringing everything together. And I ask myself in these notes, why now? Why us? Why do we get to see from the front row seats that the culmination of all things is happening right before our eyes? And the reason why is because so many people who are unsaved are asking questions of Sue and me at her work, at where I socialise. What on earth is going on in this world? And the simplest thing you can say was you can read all about it in the Bible. And it's one of the things that you can use to get into a conversation with people and then just tell them about Jesus. And there are so many people that are open now. So many people who are open because they do not understand what's going on, and everything they put their trust in has been destroyed. You can't believe anyone these days. You can believe that, and hopefully you can believe me, because you can take me to task, because you can watch it on YouTube. Write down your notes and send me an email. And I want to bring up the statue of Daniel 2, boys, please, with the 10 toes. Remember that from our earlier teachings. This is the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has in Daniel chapter 2, and none of his magi could interpret it. And Daniel came along and interpreted it and was esteemed in the kingdom. And by the way, he was esteemed so much by Nebuchadnezzar that he was like his foreign minister. He's even mentioned in Isaiah as having gone to Tyre and Sidon on the behalf of the king of Babylon. And so he's an incredible person. He's going to be one person that I'm going to be really keen on having a yak with. But I should imagine the queue would be about 14 kilometres long when we get up there. But he's an amazing guy. And I've got this up here because I want to... Can you go back to the one that's just got the toes? Yeah. The teaching now is, how on earth did we get to Magog? And this is why I'm horrified by when I talk to our 16-year-old grandson and other people about that age, is that they're totally ignorant of history. Why? Because they don't get taught it. They don't get taught it. Our grandson came home from his very highly reputed college at the end of last year, and Sue and I have had a 25-year relationship with the Jewish community in Perth. Sue's worked in Russia with the Jews, been to Israel, and lived with a Jewish family in Beersheba. So we're totally and utterly on the side of the Jewish people. That's because God is. Do you understand? People say, well, even members of my family say, oh, what's it with you and Sue and the Jews? And I said, well, it's the Abrahamic covenant. Amen. Do you not get it? If you want a blessing from God, bless the Jews. If you want a curse from God, curse the Jews, because he says that in Genesis chapter 12, 1-3. It's the Abrahamic covenant. And everything that we have been blessed with over the last few years have come from the Jewish people. It's absolutely amazing. And so when we have a look at this thing, I'm going to describe, and leave that up there for a while, guys, because I'm going to the text will just describe what happens. Look at the statue, and only the mind of God could have presented history in such a brilliant manner. When Constantine, now I'm going to give you a short history, because if you don't understand, you don't know how we got to where we are here. When Constantine was emperor of Rome, there were challenges to his rule, and the fact that Rome was at its height of debauchery. So this is around about 300 AD. And by the way, I mentioned this book to you last year, and I didn't finish what I wanted to say to you. This is Haley's Bible Handbook, all right? And about 25 years ago, when I became a serious student of eschatology, I went down to Coorong. Remember when it was in Leaderville by the car park? And I bought a little 4-book set called the Zondervan Bible Library. And one of them was Haley's Bible Handbook. And in the back, it's got about 85 pages of a potted church history. And it reveals everything, warts and all. What the medieval church did to all of the Bible-believing churches, the Wallensians, the Albigensians, the Huguenots, and the persecution. And that medieval church, according to the Haley's Bible Handbook, is guilty of probably 50 million martyrs over 1,000 years. They just slaughtered them. One pope in France, gave the orders in France, killed more Christians in Paris one night than all of the Roman emperors killed Christians in that time. And the amazing thing about this book, it's a valuable resource. But I bought this in 1995. After that, the Rothschilds told Rupert Murdoch to go and buy Zondervan and clean it up. So you can go to Coorong now and buy this book, and it's got nothing of that in the back. It's all been laundered clean. And everything is being laundered clean. History is being buried. Statues are being pulled down. You know what? If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know who you are, and you've got no idea of where you're going. And that's what cultural Marxism does. It destroys any sense of heritage. It destroys that, and so it destroys who we are and our national identity. So when Constantine was in Rome at this time, around about 300 AD, it was just so bad that he decided to shift the seat of the emperor to the city of Byzantium, which we know today as Istanbul. And Constantine renamed the city with 2 names, Nova Roma, which meant New Rome, we've just been talking Latin, and Constantinopolis. And I want you to understand this can you go back a bit, boys, first? When the statue is described, the steel starts at the waist, just below the waist, and it is a unified entity, right? It starts off as one seat of power in Rome. And then, because of Constantine, in 305 AD, he actually splits the empire. And this is the way God shows us, because it then becomes 2 legs. Do you understand? It becomes 2 legs. You've got a power seat in Rome, because a lot of people didn't want to go to Constantinople, to Byzantium, and so they had an opposing power seat in Rome. And then Byzantium or Constantinople started to blossom over the next 200 or 300 years. And this is seen perfectly in dividing of the Roman Empire from Rome to Constantinople by the 2 legs of the statue. Now, 3 emperors after Constantine. You may have heard people on YouTube or loosely talking at Bible studies or whatever that Constantine made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. He did nothing of the sort. In AD 313, he issued an Edict of Milan, which was the Edict of Toleration, which meant that the emperor has now said you can be any kind of religious person you like. There is now no oppression of Christianity or any other unwelcome pagan religion. And what happened is that Constantine was very favourable to Christians, and he filled his court with Christians. So what people did, if you wanted to get on with Constantine, you pretended, if you had to be a Christian. But 3 emperors after him, a guy called Theodosius came in, and he only was in a short period of time. He was only an emperor about 4 years, but he had time to place his 12-year-old son in Rome as emperor and his 18-year-old son as emperor in Constantinople. And that finished it. From him, it was finished, because what Theodosius did was he made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. So what does that mean? Every pagan temple in the empire became a church overnight. Every pagan priest became a minister of the Christian faith overnight. Well, how do you think that went down? You know, it's brilliant, this little book that gives you the outflowing of that. And so what Theodosius did, he not only made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire, but he suppressed every other religion. So what happens? Animosity towards Christianity, when there was a lot of sympathy for Christians because it was a spiritual movement and people were prepared to die for their faith as a witness for their Saviour. Now, all of the pagan temples are churches, and all of the priests are ministers. And I'm reminded of the passage in 2 Corinthians 11 where Lucifer can display himself as an angel of light. Therefore, there's nothing untoward if his servants, if his demons become ministers of righteousness. And it goes back 1700 years. It's absolutely amazing. And so done, finished, never to reunite again. The worst thing he ever did was to issue that decree. And it produced this map, all right? And well done, boys. So everything in the orange is the Western Roman Empire. Everything in the purple is the Eastern Roman Empire. And never was that ever repaired. It was never reunited. And it becomes really, really interesting. And this is this ends up becoming the eastern leg, Pars Occidentalis, actually ends up becoming the revived Roman Empire in this time. It's revived now. I don't know if you can see it, but it is in revival mode now. When we hear the words deep state, Illuminati, we did the guide stones a few weeks ago, everything now is coming to fruition that we can see this fourth beast of Daniel 7 coming into play. It's anti-God, it's anti-Christian, and it's anti-Israel. And everything that's happening on the world stage at the moment is really hammering that home. You know, when I was a kid and I was brought up in a Scottish Presbyterian church, not in Scotland, you know, there was a grudging respect from all of our neighbours in the street who didn't go to church. They respected church. They respected your right to go to church. And how things have changed now. That churches are being ridiculed. They're being undone from the inside by liberal Christianity. Apostasy is rampant, and there is no longer any respect for it. So it's becoming, you know, I said that God always closes the circle. We're going to go towards Babylon next week, but that's where the first one world government started from. Do you remember? In Genesis 10, where Nimrod tried to form the first world government by bringing everyone together. It's interesting that they all spoke the same language at that time. And God came down and stopped their enterprise and confused them with a whole different regime of languages and scattered them abroad over that land. And the interesting thing is, if you go to all of the ethnic groups on all of the 5 continents, they've all got the same basic history to their pagan religions. They all have a flood. They all have some form of salvation through the flood. And they also have, I can remember, I don't know if you can, Eric von Daniken. Can you remember a book that he wrote way, way back? I must have been a young kid. I wasn't even married to Sue yet. That he had in South America formed, seen and taken pictures of graphics on walls and caves and that sort of thing of these kind of spacemen that had a halo around them. And that's just Genesis 6. Seriously, that's just Genesis 6 all over again. So it fits that they all knew about Genesis 6 when Nimrod came together and tried to reform a one world government or form a one world government. And all of the things that had happened up until that time formed the basis of those pagan religions. We had a lovely Chinese lady called Ying in our church probably 15, 20 years ago. And I asked her to go home after one Bible study on a Friday night and to bring back the Chinese character for salvation, because I didn't know. And she didn't know. And so when she came back the next Friday night, she said, "This is amazing, Stuart. The Chinese character for salvation is a boat with 8 people in it." It's a boat with 8 people in it. It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? Now we come to a time when the Roman Empire in the West failed around about 450 AD, and the only authority in Rome at that time was the Bishop of Rome, and he was a guy called Leo I. And he had the personality and the stature to persuade Attila the Hun to spare the city in 452 AD, and 3 years later he likewise persuaded Genseric the Vandal to spare the city. And this is under God's total control. Why? Because Rome was never destroyed. The empire never died. It just went underground. It lost its imperial military form and it took on a religious form, which you will see as we go through this, led to the Magog War. So the imperial Rome was gone, but the papacy had taken over. Such was Leo's stature that everyone now, and even the surrounding kings in Italy, went to Leo for advice about things. And the church had become an empire. So the Roman Empire would not disappear, but morph into a debauched ecclesiastical empire with its own land, consisting of mostly of central Italy. And when it reappears, it will culminate as the 4th dreadful empire that will have the 10 toes, the 10 horns, and the 10 kings. They're all the same thing. And you and I are smack in the middle of its reemergence. In the East, however, the Greek church, that's all right, the Greek church, as it was first called, stumbles along until the mid-15th century, until Constantinople was overtaken by Muhammad II in the Muslim invasion of Eastern Europe. Because of this, the church then moved north to eventually settle in the city of Kiev in what we now know as Ukraine. And it then morphed into the Eastern Orthodox Church. Over that time period leading up to that, the bishop, the Pope in Rome, the Papa in Rome, and the Patriarch in Constantinople used to abuse each other so badly and issue edicts against each other that the animosity between the two churches was never able to be repaired. And there was intense hatred between the two churches as they took their places in the modern history from 1500 onwards. And so it's very interesting that it moved up to Kiev at that time, because that's the same time that Peter the Great began to build modern Russia. And the patriarchs of the East held sway over the Tsars And the popes interfered at every opportunity in the political and religious life in Europe. In that book, you can read the dreadful things that they did all around Europe to maintain power. So Russia grew alongside the influence of the patriarchs of the East, and Europe suffered under the popes. And the entire animosity between East and West was grounded in the hatred of the two religious systems trying to eliminate each other. If you remember last week, I was talking to you about the Scythians and their strategies in warfare, that they would never confront an enemy, they would always pull back until the enemy got so far stretched on his supply lines he could be destroyed. And do you recall that I mentioned that Napoleon did that in the early 18th century? Do you remember that? And do you remember Hitler tried it again in 1941? Do you understand that Catholic Napoleon did it and Catholic Hitler did it? So behind those two invasions was that same animosity between Catholicism and the Eastern Orthodox. And it's been there ever since the split in the 300s. And all along, it's so obvious to the astute believer that God is in control. He arranges that. Do you know what I mean? He put the thoughts in the mind of Constantine to look at Rome and the debauchery, and he wasn't actually a bad emperor, to be quite frank. And so he put the thoughts in Constantine to go east and set up in Byzantium. And you know, as I was doing these notes together for today's message, it really amazed me. We look at God in control of nations and peoples and wars and famines and all the rest of it. You know, he's in the same control as you and I. Do you understand that? Have you ever thought about how much control he has had over your life? And I mean your genealogy. While Constantine was shifting from Rome to Constantinople, your grandpappy and grandmummy somewhere in the world were getting together at the same time. Do you see what I mean? Because he has been in control of your genealogy from the time that Noah and the boys got out of the ark and repopulated the earth. Do you know what I mean? Because he knew you personally from before the foundation of the earth. And for him to know you here, sitting here today, he's been in control of every relationship that's been in your genealogy. Don't worry about empires and nations and wars. He's in control of you. And one day, we're going to stand up there in his presence in the new heavens and the new earth. And we're going to look at him at Revelation 21 verse 4. Such will be the joy and the love that we have. We'll have tears of joy. And do you know what he will do? He'll come down and he'll wipe the tears of joy away from your cheeks. That's how much God is in control. Do you understand? We lose the personal because we look at the gigantic. And he's watching us now. He's listening to us now, and he knows what's going on in every one of your hearts now. And I'm quite cock-a-hoop about that sister of mine right at the moment, I really am. Out of this 10-division world, can you put the, thanks boy, this is the Club of Rome. Anyone don't know it about the Club of Rome? It formed after World War II. All the Illuminati, all the richies got together and they divided up the world into 10 regions because they had this whole thing in their minds back then. Do you understand? The 10 toes of Daniel 7, 2,500 years ago, was put into the minds of these people after World War II to create that map. That's how much control God the Father is in everything. He's just... Have any of you ever tried to play three-dimensional chess? It's on 3 different levels. Have you ever tried it? It did my head in. But I picture God up there and he's got 10 levels of pieces and people and everything, and it's just no trouble to him at all. And never a mistake is made. because he's in control of you, because he loves you, and he's waiting to have you up there. And in fact, in Ephesians 2, verses 1 to 9, you're already up there. Do you understand that? All of the verbs in Ephesians 2, 1 to 9, when you were dead in your trespasses and sins, he made you alive. This is a short form of it. He made you alive and raised you up into heavenly places in Christ Jesus to be seated in heavenly places in him. And when you get to Revelation chapter 4, what do you see sitting around the throne of God? 24 elders. That's the church. That's you and I. If you're really good, you could be there. Or if you're really faithful, you will be there. So out of this 10-division world, the 10 chief administrators who will form a kind of supreme council are formed, and up through their midst will be the 11th horn, the little horn of Daniel 7, who will speedily establish himself as superior to the 10 others. It is because of this. He comes up through the administration. No one sees him coming. And you know what? There's some astute commentators that say the same thing. No one ever saw Bill Clinton coming to be president of the United States. He was governor of Arkansas. That's like you're the milk bottle boy of American politics. And the next thing you know, he goes from governor of Arkansas to president of the United States. 2008, where did Barack Obama come from? Where did he come from? He was unknown. And people say when they look at this particular passage about the little horn, how can that happen? It's happened time and time and time again. That the obscure and the unnoticed all of a sudden are up there. There is a particular woman who is Prime Minister of the Shaky Isles across the ditch, and no one knows where she came from. She actually worked for the Clintons, and she also worked for Tony Blair. So when the Illuminati decided that New Zealand politics needed a shake-up, they shoehorned her into the Labour Party just before an election, and she made it. That first election, they lost, and normally there's a New Zealand First Party that generally comes together, and she did a sweet deal with the guy that made him foreign minister, and that's the only way she got in. But she has a spell over that country. She has a spell. Sue was there for 4 days for her mum's 90th birthday last weekend, and she just cannot believe the spirit over that nation now. That no one in her family, no one in my family will hear a word against her. It's a spell, do you understand? It's spiritual and it's evil. And so what happens is people will come out of nowhere and bang. Why? Because it's God's plan. And God will never be thwarted in bringing to fulfillment his plans. And you know what? When we have a look at what's coming up, it's going to be horrible for those who don't have any faith in Jesus. It's going to be terrible. And so he's the one that signs the peace treaty with Israel. And I'll just bring one of these guys up. Just bring me Daniel 9, 26 and 27. You're all aware of the Daniel 9 prophecy. If you come to a Calvary Chapel, Perth, you should be pretty switched on. Anyway, the angel Gabriel came to see Daniel while he was praying and interceding for Israel and the sins of Israel while they were still in Babylon, and he was praying for his own sins. Do you see what I mean? He was never perfect, but he had a sense of righteousness about him because he believed in the God of Israel. And so he was praying for certain things. Gabe turns up and gives him a prophecy and says to Daniel, it has been determined that 70 weeks will be applied to you, your people, and your holy city. So 70 weeks. Week is a shavuim in Hebrew, which is a 7-year period. And we go all the way back to Genesis, if you want to understand that. What did poor old Jacob have to do for his 2 wives? He had to work 7 years twice. He got tricked the first time with Leah, and that's 7 years. So a shavuim is actually a week, and a week of years. That's a Hebrew description that most people miss. And so those 62 weeks and the 69 weeks will be finished when Jesus rides into the city of Jerusalem on the donkey, 173,780 days after the Persian king makes a decree that they can go back and rebuild the city and the walls and the temple. And so that's to the day. You know, when Jesus said to the Jewish people in Luke 19, if only you had known this thy day of your visitation, as he rode into the city of Jerusalem on that day, they should have known by that prophecy that he was the Messiah. And they were throwing palm fronds down in front of him saying, Baruch atah b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And they thought that he was going to throw off the yoke of Rome and set Israel free. But there was an idiom that everyone missed. In the ancient kingdoms, if a king wanted to visit another king in peace, when he approached the palace, the visiting king would always be on a donkey. That was a symbol of peace. If the king was coming to wage war, he would be on a horse. So he entered into Jerusalem on a donkey. Why? Because he came to bring peace. Peace. And you know what? If you are witnessing to a Jewish person and you tell them that Jesus is their Messiah, they'll say, well, if he was our Messiah, where is our peace? They know that that's inextricably linked to the Messiah, that when the Messiah comes, Israel will finally have peace. Well, they rejected him. So no peace for 1900 years. Then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So who destroyed the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD? Rome, the Roman army. In fact, it was the 15th, 12th and 15th Roman legions that did it. And the Roman legions were Roman soldiers from Italy that were the most highly trained in the Roman army. Why? Because the Roman army was largely made up of foreign mercenaries. And what happened was, if you signed up as a mercenary into the Roman army, you had to serve for 25 years if you made it, and at the end you got citizenship and you got a wad of money and a piece of land. That was your reward for being a mercenary with the Roman army. But for this one, God arranged for the 15th, 12th and 15th Roman legions to come and trash Jerusalem in 70 AD, Tish B'Av. And look at the description in this verse. It's absolutely brilliant. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. I'm not making any firm statement about this, but that seems to imply that the European Antichrist could have some kind of Italian ancestry. Do you see what I mean? Simply because that's what the Bible says. The prince of the people who is to come, that, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if he's Norwegian. I won't be here, and neither will you. Do you understand? And this is the prince who is to come, will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week, 7 years. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate until a complete destruction, one that is decreed. gushes forth on the one who makes desolate. And that until a complete destruction is in Revelation 19 when Jesus picks him up and the false prophet up and throws him straight into the lake of fire. Have you read that? Revelation 19, you've all done that? It's really important that you get that, because you can't be thrown into the lake of fire until you've got your resurrection body. Do you understand that? You can't go there unless you've been resurrected first. And everyone's going, we'll do that next week. All right? I'm really short of time. I'll fill in the other things next week, but I just want to go through. Sue said, you make sure you finish on a positive note. So I'm going to go through some of the verses that you know about the coming thing, where we hear the trumpet, we hear the shout of the archangel, and we hear, come up here. This week would be good. John 14, 1-3. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. Forget the mansions. When Sue and I were into this sort of eschatology thing and looking at that, and these pastors, on early morning American television used to say, there's a mansion waiting for you in heaven. And my wife, women are incredibly practical, do you understand? And she turned to me and she says, well, who's going to clean it? In my Father's house there are many, many dwelling places. If that was not so, I would have told you. And I go to prepare a place for you. And I will return and gather you to myself. Episunagagi, that's gathering you like a hen gathers his chicks. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I am coming again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you also will be. We're going up there. And I always ask people when they get excited about that, I always come back to 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5. Test yourself to see if you be walking in the faith. And so if that's coming right now, how are we walking with Jesus day by day? Have you got things you need to deal with? Have you got people to forgive who, in your estimation, don't deserve to be forgiven, but God wants you to? Because unforgiveness is the only prison that you lock yourself into. Don't ever forget that. Acts 20, 18-20, this is Paul speaking to the elders at Ephesus. And when they came to him, he said to them, you yourselves know from the first day that I set foot in Asia, how I was with you the whole time, serving the Lord with all humility and with tears and trials which came upon me through the plots of the Jews. How I did not shrink back from declaring to you anything that was beneficial. That is, he taught every church that he ever went to the entire counsel of God. They all got the rapture. They all got the doctrines. They all got the sanctification. They all got the justification. They all got the glorification. He taught every church those things. And that's what he said to the Ephesian church in 1 Corinthians 1:7, so that you are not lacking in any gift, as you eagerly await the revelation of our Lord Jesus Christ. If you knew the tribulation was coming, would you be eager? No, you're eager for the rapture. 1 Corinthians 15:50-58, we're doing that in this week's, next week's Wednesday night Bible study. Now, I say to this, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Behold, I am telling you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. 1 microsecond you're here, the next microsecond you're up there in the clouds staring at Jesus. In the twinkling of an eye. Remember, those of you who are Chuck Misslerites, like Sue and I used to be, he said he gave a 10 to the minus 43 seconds. That's how fast it is. Trust Chuck to say that, do you know what I mean? But it's the speed that light passes through your pupil, and they've measured it. And Chuck was a one and only. We love him. Didn't agree with everything he said, but he was a brilliant one. In the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised imperishable, and you and I hopefully will be changed. For this perishable must put on the imperishable. And I want to go to Galatians 1, 3 and 4 just to hurry up. I've got a couple of minutes left. People never look, when you're actually teaching books, you see these things inserted in certain chapters. In Galatians 1, 3 and 4, grace to you and peace from God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins so that he might rescue us from this present evil age according to the will of our God and Father. Well, if he's going to rescue us from this present evil age, we're not going to go through this present evil age, are we? Colossians 3, 1 to 4. Therefore, if you've been raised with Christ, keep seeking the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. So therefore we have to be up with him when he comes back in the second coming. And 1 Thessalonians 9:10, I'll finish off with that because you all know, you should know 4:13 to 18 off by heart. For they themselves report about us as to the kind of reception we had with you. This is Paul talking to the Thessaloniki church. And how you turned to God from idols to serve a living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, that is Jesus, who rescues us from the wrath to come. Well, if I look out, I can see a lot of wrath around the place. And it's growing, and it's smoking, and it's billowing. I believe we're out of here really soon. I really do. But in the meantime, go to your 79-year-old sister and hit her again with the gospel. All right? Never, ever look at any member of your... I did. I looked at her and said, there's no way she'll ever accept it. She was a person of this world. But we gave our personal testimonies, and this lady here wouldn't give up on her. And we get that result. Father, we just thank you now that you have just graced us with your presence, Father, in the praise and worship. We've studied your word that you have given us that we might understand the times and the seasons that we are in. Father, I just praise you for your love and your care and your concern for all of us. And Father, we need healing for some of our congregants here, really, really, really big time healing, Father. And I ask you that you would just lean over from the throne of grace and touch them this week, Father. And that anything that is miraculous would bring glory to your name, Father. And we ask you now in the time of fellowship in the cafe that we would still, everything we think, do and say would bring honour to your name. And all God's people said, Amen. Thank you.